Hey, we're back again, and today we are going to talk about adult children, parenting adult children, and also honoring your parents. So today I have Kurt with me. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited to talk about this. I have zero experience in parenting adult children, as my children are all young, but I'm excited to lean into you and kind of just talk about parenting and honoring your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am not sure I have much to say about the subject. Parenting is one of those subjects that's really hard to talk about because you never really know how well you're doing it or not doing it. And even if things turn out well, I'm not sure that saying, wow, what I did must have been the key.
Right.
Because there's so much variation, God's hand, that we just, it's hard to look back even where I'm standing, which is 4 adult children at this point, and say, oh, well, this is what everyone should do.
Yeah.
I think that's, it's much more of a dance than it is a prescription.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even just being a parent, it wasn't until I was a parent that you realized just how different we all are. You think you're going to have kids, they'll be X, Y, and Z because you and your spouse are X, Y, and Z, and then you have more than one child, and you or even just one, and you're like, no, completely different than what you expected.
They all respond so differently to the same set of circumstances.
Right. Can you speak to maybe how in your parenting journey that you've responded to that, knowing that they are different? I know even when they were younger, like specific types of discipline didn't work because of their different personalities.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that your kids are different, so it's okay to parent them differently. And it's natural, I think, a lot of times to say, oh, because this is what worked with one, or this is how I was parented, or this is what I think, then this should be universal. And every kid needs their own approach, at least in part. There's a book that was written years ago by Marcus Buckingham, and it was on, I think it was Buckingham, but it was on leading an organization, so it wasn't on parenting, but his premise was, to lead well, you have to lean into what's universal. To manage well, you have to lean into what's individual. And so his point was, if you want to galvanize all the people in the organization, you've got to, here's where we're all going, here's the vision. But management is about each person brings something unique and is wired differently, so you have to be very individual.
Yeah.
And that helped me in thinking about parenting. So for the whole family, what Faith and I tried to do, Faith's my wife, if you didn't know, but what we tried to do was say, okay, what's universal? How do we say, hey, we want to be the kind of a family where when you come home, it's the happiest place that you're going to be all day.
Yeah.
This is going to be the safest place you're going to be. Those are universal. But okay, for you, now this is what we're going to talk about. One of our kids, when he was little, was just sour. That was like, he woke up sour.
Yeah.
And we used to say to him all the time, hey, are we going to choose to be pleasant and positive today? Or are you going to lean into your sourness?
Yeah.
And maybe it was over aggressive, but it was a way just to try to help him reframe, because everything was negative the way he started out. And so we would just tweak them. Now, we didn't have to say that to our other boys at the same level. And I'm sure we had things with the other boys that we didn't have to do. And that's what I mean when I say you have to say, okay, there's these big principles, but then there's unique individual things that each child needs.
That's great. Yeah, we have one of those. We call them our Sour Patch. First they're sour, then they're sweet. And once they get through their sour phase,
then they get a little sweet. So what do you do to help individually then address that?
We call it out. I think that's a real important aspect of it, is calling out whatever behavior, action that it is. And then it is encouragement. It's encouragement that, okay, like you said, you could look at this way, and then probably the rest of your day is going to be this way, or we can try to find something that looks differently. Also giving space and time to process that, and not expecting it immediately to change or immediately to be better.
Yep.
That it is a process over time, even in that moment of hearing what you're saying. And so that's kind of how.
Yeah, one of the things I think we tried to do was not legislate feelings. It's okay to feel whatever you feel, but it's not okay to behave however you want to behave.
Right.
So you can be upset, but your behavior is different from your feelings.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you can feel whatever you want to feel, but you have to choose to act in a certain way, at least when they were young.
Yeah, no, we've had that same, like, you can be angry, but you're not going to be disrespectful. Like, there's a difference between you having this emotion and God gave you, but also you're not going to be disrespectful. That's great. So as they are growing up and, have their own lives, how have you, if you've noticed, how's your relationship changed maybe, or have you seen? Yeah,
radically. And it changes earlier than most parents think, I would say. So Faith and I, my wife, if you didn't know, one of the things we tried to do, and we had read this in a book years and years ago, we tried to do something we called self-government by the time you're a senior in high school. So our idea was, by the time you're a senior in high school, we're done trying to give any restrictions, boundaries, direction other than when asked for, other than the general house stuff. So, hey, we're all having dinner. You don't get to choose not to help with dishes. If you want to eat dinner, we're all going to help with dishes. That kind of thing. But curfews, when they do homework, who they went and spent time with, any of that kind of stuff. We just said, okay, this is your choice. And our thought process was, you're 9 months away at that point from complete freedom. I would much rather say, we've trusted you with the same freedom you're going to have right now, and let's talk about, okay, so you stayed out pretty late. How did that work out for you? And it's okay for your kids to make different choices than you would make. In fact, that's good. That's part of them becoming adults, is that they're going to choose to do things differently, to value different things, to approach things differently, maybe even to believe different things. Certainly we hoped that our kids from a faith standpoint would affirm the essentials of faith. But even within that, within the household of faith, there's different expressions of faith, different ways to live things out, different things to value. And so even in that, to be able to say, it's okay. And so for us, I think we were on a journey from early saying that's our goal, to give as much responsibility as we could to our kids at as early an age as they showed an ability to handle it. So our relationship, I think, changed even while they were in early high school from really active parenting to much more advisor when asked, sometimes when unasked. Hey, I know you're not asking for this, but here's a thought. And I'll still do that sometimes. My kids are all now grown, but I'll say, hey, I noticed this, and here's a thought I had. Do with it what you want.
How's that received, do you think?
Usually in the moment, it's a little like, hey, I got this. But often I'll hear later, or I'll see something where they'll say, okay, thank you, or they may not say thank you, but I'll see them take some of it. And sometimes they won't, and I try to really make that truly the spirit of it, is, hey, this is just a preference. I mean, a lot of times it'll be things like, oh, you're going to a job interview, and I wouldn't wear that if I were you, but you wear what you want to wear. I'm not you, and I don't understand the image that you're trying to present. That's just not the image I would present, or whatever it is. So those are the kinds of things where I still want to feel like I can say something, but I feel like you have to continually earn the right to say something as they get older. And because I remember being 20, and I didn't want to hear a whole lot from my parents. I wanted to go do what I thought was best, and so we've tried to say that is the approach. So once in a while, maybe I'll say something, about something, but even then I try to really say, okay, that's not really my role unless I'm asked at this point.
I think Evan and I have a similar approach. My husband is Evan. right now when they're younger where we have some structure, but there's freedom within that structure so that they can learn how to make decisions for themselves, because we I don't know, read in some book just how important it is to build resilience in kids and that they understand how to self-govern themselves. I don't think we have specifically called it self-governing. Now that you put it that way, I see that it is aligning for that. And I think when we first were talking about parenting, Evan had this very strong opinion of that. Now that I see that he's like, they need to be independent. And I was like a little turned off about how strong it was. But then I realized that we are parenting people and that we want them to be good people. When we first started talking about children, we said we want them to be good people and not be buttholes in the world. Like that is one of our main goals.
So it's a nice simple goal.
Nice simple goal.
That's right. That's what we're after.
And it takes some a lot of intentionality about it. Like you said, it's not always easy. And it's very tiring at times.
Yeah, well, especially when they're young, because you feel like you're constantly tweaking everything, and it does become okay. When do I step back? And I think a lot of the challenges in parenting along the years are either letting go too early of some of the parenting, abdicating. Hey, that's you.
Yeah.
Or overly functioning
Yeah.
in that role and not letting go
Right.
too long, where you're suffocating the capacity of that child to become an adult.
Yeah.
And that's, and again, different for each kid. It's not like you can say, oh, at 15 you do this, at
Right.
16 you do this, at 17.
Yeah.
And so every kid needs to be assessed and thought through. And it's really, like I think I used that word dance earlier. It's a dance of, okay, we're going to try this, and that may not have worked. But the other thing I would say, especially to parents who have young kids still, is don't apologize for trying to influence direction, because that's something else I see is people saying, oh, it's a blank canvas and they just need to go wherever they want to go. And I think you were given kids in part to raise them to honor God, to be, global citizens.
Yeah.
And so don't be apologetic for trying to influence them toward what you value, because you obviously value it for a reason.
Yeah.
But also then be able to say, okay, at some point, if they value this more than this, that's their life and their choice in terms of how they want to live.
Yeah. How did you navigate, like, we understanding you're parenting your kids differently, if one of your children called that out or recognized X, Y, and Z, like, oh, well, they got this then, I should be getting this now because, did you experience any of that?
We tried to be fair in terms of resource allocation. Probably to a fault. But I also knew that kids do compare that. And so, even down to, okay, comparing Christmas gifts and how much, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would say where it came into being was we were probably had harder restrictions on our older kids than we did on our younger when they were young.
Yeah.
And so they would often say, oh man, you were easier on them.
Yeah.
And we may have been. I think sometimes there's a tendency when you start to be a little more just, I want to do this right. And I think you sometimes over the years say, okay, maybe those things didn't matter as much as I thought they did. Maybe they did, and it set a tone. I mean, who knows? But yes, our kids would say that we were easier on the ones who came later.
I think about it specifically for us when we're introducing technology to each of our kids, and for us it's more of a maturity level than it is an age. And so having those conversations with our kids, like, hey, this is probably going to it might happen a little later or a little sooner, just because of how you can handle this in your life. And having those conversations with them very often and with different aspects has been really good for us, for them to understand that we do see them as who they are individually, and for that reason, some things happen differently in their lives. But we do try to stay as fair as possible.
But it isn't fair, and it's okay to say, all things won't be fair.
Yeah.
And there's different reasons for different things. Well, another thing that I think has been important as I've thought about parenting is the New Testament doesn't say a whole lot about it. And its main instruction is in Ephesians and in Colossians, where it says, don't embitter your children.
Right.
Don't exasperate. Two different words. So basically the same command. More or less, keep your kids' hearts open to you. And there's a train them up in the way of the Lord that's there as well. But in order to even train them up, that is the command. And that's a hard command if you really think about it, because it's, okay, how do I keep my kids' hearts open? And some kids might be unreasonable and you might need to push back hard. And there might be some moments where, okay, it feels like I'm embittering them because I'm trying to give them a restriction that I know is good for them and everything else. But that has always struck me as an important piece of the parenting.
Yeah.
So important that really is the primary command in the New Testament to parents, to fathers specifically.
Yeah.
Don't embitter your child.
Yeah. And when we hear that verse, I know you said open their hearts open, and specifically I think the verse is speaking to you and to their parents. And I think that I know growing up it's really easy to hear the commandment, honor thy mother and father, and you tell your kids honor your mother and father. But like you pointed out in the New Testament, we have a little bit of the flip there where it's like, okay, yeah, that is the commandment, but you parents, you father, don't push them so far that they're hardened that they won't come to you. And
it's probably a good command to remember even as you age as a parent, not to embitter your kids or exasperate them. That's probably even better.
Yeah.
Because it's saying do your best to not become a burden to your kids, and sometimes that's unavoidable, but sometimes parents become burdens, not necessarily physically or financially, but just emotionally. Or in some other way, just to say, you need to do your best to not say, hey, I need. Now, again, there's legitimate need and legitimate time to do that. But that is the flip side of the honor command.
Yeah.
And if both are doing it, then it's a beautiful relationship. But if only one does, then it's a little harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's switch gears a little bit now that we're talking about honoring thy mother and father. So we were kind of talking about parenting adult children. Let's talk about honoring your mother and father, maybe as an adult. I don't know how many kids are watching our podcast, so maybe we'll do a separate one.
Guessing it's not 7-year-old. Hey, I want to check this out. Material,
Yeah, although they are the generation where technology is like an appendage. So
that's right.
Maybe we should check our audience.
Yes.
But let's just talk about how that looks in our lives and in other people's lives around us now. We're living longer than ever as a population, so we're having more time with our parents, hopefully, and our grandparents, and what that looks like to honor them during those times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you live in some of that right now.
Yeah.
How are you interpreting that thing with kind of where you are?
Yeah, it's really unique. I'll speak about two different, I think, aspects of it. I'm adopted, so right now we're going through it with my parents, my mom and dad, who adopted me. I'll always refer to them as mom and dad. And
how old were you?
I was a baby.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was in a foster home for about 8 weeks, and then I was baby Jane, and then they adopted me. So my dad is in his second journey of cancer, and so he's just like the most wonderful person you ever meet. He's the chillest, most kind, and they live in Virginia. And so we got the diagnosis. It's a rare cancer, and there's not a ton of treatment options. So anyway, fast forward, we're going through all of this, and through God and in our community, we realized that there's better treatment for here in Pittsburgh. And so my husband Evan and I talked. We said, hey, looks like we need to get them to Pittsburgh. And just so blessed by being able to have that conversation. One, to know that I'm in a marriage, the foundation is that we are supporting one another. And that's not to say that what we are doing now, which is my parents lived with us in our home for about 3 months.
Okay.
Wasn't difficult. It was very hard. We rearranged my 8-year-old's room, and then, you know, she was sharing a room with a sibling. So a lot of sacrifice, a lot of change, a lot of flexibility there. But I think the main thing that I was able to do is spiritually, it was a really easy yes for me, because of who they are and what God has done for me in my life. And I was a little worried about, you know, what it would do to our family, what it could do to our family. And we had a really awesome community. Even you, I don't even know if you remember, I was talking to you about it, and I was kind of praising Evan about how how easy he was making it. And you're like, yeah, like he should. And and it's great because I feel like as a society, that's not what we get. We don't get that this is honorable and this is something that we should be looking forward to do as a society. It's this huge burden, which it can be. Again, it doesn't mean that it's not easy, but we should also be looking at these opportunities as something that enriches our lives, because it does, and that we are honoring them and honoring God in that way. And so I was really blessed that we had community and leadership that poured into us to say, hey, yeah, this isn't going to be easy, but it is honoring. And I think through that lens and through that those emotions, we were able to make it a really, I mean, it was a great time. I mean, there were hard days and moments, but at the end of it, all my kids are like, well, why are they leaving? And not like, get them out of here. And, you know, Evan and I were sad when, you know, they were going, and we were just very thankful that we had the opportunity to care for them and love for them.
How's your dad doing now?
He is doing great. Good. He actually, this timing, just celebrated his last chemo treatment yesterday.
That's awesome.
We're just, they're going to be back up so we can celebrate why he's healthy.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. And that's very honoring what you guys did. And it's helpful to sometimes step back from our culture. In the history of the world and even the world today, most people still assume that when their parents are old, they'll take them in and take care of them. It's unique in America where we assume that if we do that, that somehow we have this unique burden.
Right.
I'm not saying it's not a burden.
Yeah.
It's a burden, yes, even if they're in a home nearby, because it's something else to think about, attend to, everything else that goes with that. And so, but I do think there is something to, how do I honor by including my parents in my life, in my holidays? How do I honor as they age and need care, to, avail myself of being able to provide some of that care either logistically through others or personally. And realizing that a lot of care in our world today is more emotional than it is even physical, because a lot of our parents have the resources, and our Social Security system is really pretty good in our country. Most seniors are taken care of. And so it really is more about, okay, they need visits, they need calls, they need care, than it is even, hey, I need to physically do everything. And so that, just remembering that and embracing that, I think, is a part of honoring. When it gets harder is when people feel like their parents haven't been very honorable. And as if, okay, how do I honor somebody who didn't parent well when I was young, didn't, like those are harder decisions, because now they're fraught with something, but in some ways, it allows you to say you're doing it as unto the Lord, not just for them. Because I think it's one thing to say, oh, I would of course do that because they were there for me. They did this. They were great. It's another thing to say they weren't great. And you know what? I'm still going to choose to do this because I think it's honoring to God. And they're both good, but it's it's part of, I think, being able to say that is what that means, whatever that means. And again, we talked in a previous podcast about people telling us what we should or shouldn't do, using the Lord's name. Ultimately, how you honor your parents, that you should honor your parents, is clear biblical command. How you do it, what that means, no one else can tell you. Somebody else may may look at your situation, my situation, and say, oh, well, I would do this, or I wouldn't do that.
Right.
And that might be perfectly legit. And so it's, it really is a prayer, discernment.
Right.
Okay, what's this going to look like?
Yeah. So I said that I'd speak to the other side of it, which is great because I did have the opportunity to meet my biological parents back in 2020. And so wrestling what that looked like, because I think growing up, I always wanted to meet my biological family. You have this childlike imagination of what it'll be like to meet them, that there'll be this instant bond and love, and that just wasn't the case. And there was nothing wrong with that. I didn't meet them until I was well into my 30s, and they had these whole lives, and they were their own people, and I was my own person. So, like I said, it was very easy for me to do that with my parents. It then was a more honoring God and a struggle for me to figure out how I honored them. And I think you spoke to it very well, that it was just different. It looked a little differently. But the fact that I made the decision to do that, and it wasn't easy. It was definitely, okay, God, I know this is honoring you. And then now, some years later, it is easier and easier. And I'm able to see them as a person and give them the grace and the mercy that I should, not because of myself, because of God. And that has been a really cool journey for me, and to be able to honor them in those ways. And I think
that is.
Unfortunately, my biological father passed away tragically and suddenly a couple years ago, and that really did prompt me to dive deeper into that and what that looks like to now honor my biological mother, and not waste those moments of being able to honor God in that way. So definitely can be, it's easy. It
adds a whole nother layer to your life that, there's a lot of complexity there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think just in some ways asking the question even is half the battle. Okay, what does it look like for me to honor in this situation?
Yeah.
Because you'll probably get closer to it asking the question than if you never asked the question.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, and I did. Yeah, that's where I started and went to Scripture and thought, like, what is this command saying? What does it look like? And like you said, there are no details about how or what that looks like. And so I just took that and prayed about it and thought about what that would mean for those relationships in my life. And I think so far I'm doing an okay job. So.
Okay, good. That's good.
Yeah. How about you? Have you had moments where you felt like, oh, this is the path I'm honoring here, or maybe some struggles or?
Yeah. So 8 years ago, we moved my mom and dad here to Pittsburgh. They had lived in northern Wisconsin for most of their married lives, and my dad was in failing health, so it was okay. Let's get them closer where we can help them a little.
Right.
My dad died about a year later, and then my mom just died in December. We've had about 8 years of pretty direct support care. It was in many ways easy, in many ways not. Especially at the end, I'd say my mom, when my dad first died, I probably talked to my mom almost every day for quite a while, and then tried to kind of say, okay, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk every other day.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk. And then she got cancer again. She'd had that years ago, and then spent a couple of years going in and out of treatments. And so there was just a lot of direct care. And I would say that got harder the farther into it got. And the best description I can think of for it is it's a little bit like the proverbial frog in the boiling kettle of water, where you don't even realize how intense it's getting until all of a sudden it's done.
Right.
And when my mom died in December, all of a sudden it was, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much of my time and energy was going into that.
Yeah.
But having said that, I wouldn't have done anything differently because, of course, you're going to do your best to take care of your mom, even regardless of what that relationship is. And maybe I shouldn't say of course, because I know there's people who do, who can say, hey, you you do you and I've got to live my life. For me, that didn't feel like that would be honoring. But I also did try to put some limits on it in terms of if she had had her way, I would have visited every day.
Yeah.
And because she visited her mom and dad every day. When they were at the end,
Yeah.
I was a little kid, I remember it.
Yeah.
Literally, she would go visit them every day. So in her mind, that's what I should have done.
Right.
So we had to have a few talks that were pretty straightforward about, I'm not going to do what you did.
Yeah.
That's not that I don't love you or want to honor you, but
Yeah.
I'm going to approach it a little differently.
Yeah.
And here's how I'm going to approach it. And
here it is.
yeah. And so we had some of those talks and along the way, but she tried to take it graciously and always say, okay,
I got it.
even though I want you here more. But
Yeah.
But I think that's a natural tension and hard in relationships to navigate.
Right. Yeah, especially I think when my parents were here, there were certain things that like I was exposed to, not right or wrong, but like when my grandmother was in the hospital, we were there every day and I was around it a lot. And I just was like, okay, my kids are going to be here and I want them to see what it looks like to care for someone else. But I'm also, there's certain things I'm just not going to expose them to. And having those conversations with my parents and I think were good, healthy limitations and boundaries that we had and that it's okay, it can look differently and probably should depending on who you are.
Yeah, and probably, I mean, if I were to speak to myself from 10 years ago, before I entered that part of the journey, I would say it would be wise to think through your limits or your boundaries, whatever word you want to use, beforehand and have clarifying conversations as much as possible ahead of time to set expectations because unmet expectations are what create pressure both sides of that. And so if I were to do it again, I think I tried to be clear and have those conversations, but in hindsight, I don't think I was even clear in my own mind exactly what that was or could have been. And so we ended up doing a lot of it on the fly. And I think, probably anything you can get in front of is helpful.
Part of that is because, like we spoke to as a society, it's not something we talk about or that there is a lot of information about how you navigate this. So kind of you don't know what you're getting into. And while there are thousands of books on parenting that you can go to, I don't know, there might be more now, but there's not a ton of resources on what this looks like on the other end of things. So.
That's for sure.
Definitely, I agree. Like trying to set yourself up in the beginning as well as you can. And Well, thanks so much for your time, Kurt.
You.
This was awesome. If you enjoyed what you saw here today, please make sure to comment, share with all your friends and family. It's one way that we can reach them. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye.